Okay, I was unhappy with the place, Arthur Colton. I was making pharmaceutical punches and dies and wanted to get closer to Kalkaska. And started building a house over here, and I saw this ad in the paper that for an ad in Grayling for a job in the tool room. And I went down at lunchtime, called them up, but on the payphone back then, and made an appointment. Took off early one day and went over there, and lo and behold, I run right into a guy I used to work with at Colton Company. And so then I went over and interviewed and took around the place, and the next thing I knew, the gentleman I'd interviewed with was sitting in my parking lot, or in my driveway when I came home one night to work on the house, and wanted to know when I wanted to start to work. So I gave my 2 weeks notice where I was working and went to work over there in the tool room. And that became interesting because it was all new to me, and they built all their own machinery to do whatever jobs they needed, and that was done in the tool room. So they was building a new broadhead assembly machine at that time, and a gentleman by the name of Vic Westman, very self-taught, very, very sharp in tooling and great sheet metal worker, was working on it, and I got to working with him, and we put that together, and it was a rotary machine. I took a ferrule and a blade and welded them together and brazed and indented and did all the sawing and put one out every, I think it was 5.5 seconds, which was a big improvement over an old one that they'd had, which was just a straight line job. And so I went from there, and then got involved in Don Sherwin then was superintendent or manager there, and he came with some feather burning machines that he'd invented at one time. And so he came out, gave me some sketches, and wanted me to build 2 new feather machines with the changes that he'd thought about. What made it quicker to set up and operate. So I built those 2, and that worked fine, and then ended up back with Vic Westman building a feather cutting machine to cut the quills to the point where you could put them on an arrow. And so we followed those all the way through. We had a right wing and a left wing machine, because that's the only way you could hold the feather on there. And so I went from that, and then Owen Jeffery came on board as the new Bowyer.
How about, do you want to go over your team and R&D department and what each person's kind of specialty was at the time when you were there as the Bowyer?
In the research area?
Yeah, like Neil Bice and...
Neil was real good at finishing and sanding and doing the actual, floor work. And so I could just hand him a bow and we'd get it hand shaped into something, and then give it to him, and he'd, could get it all polished up and ready to go. And Glenn Graham was out of the tool room, and so especially when it came to I think the reasoning they put him in with me, because when we went to the compound bow, there was a lot of getting into mechanics, and so he was good in the tool room, and he could make parts. If I wanted a different cam or a different mechanism, ratchet or whatever, I could sketch it up and hand it to him and tell him what I wanted it made out of, and we could make it and then test and see if it was something we liked or disliked. And then Jimmy Helmick he was good in everything. He'd come up from Ford Design in Dearborn, and he was ambidextrous. He could work with either hand, and he was very, very craftsmanship-wise. He could make medallions, and he made molds for sand castings and for experimental. He was the one that designed. We already had the wood riser, and he redesigned the wood C riser and the B riser into the die cast. I made the shape that I wanted it to be, and then he made the actual model and did the cavity and the mold for die casting. And well, originally it was sand cast, and then when we got it proved out, it was a die cast. But he was very, very good in that, and he's the one that designed the interchangeable grip. And I know I made the grips out of wood that I told him that we wanted, and then he took those. And so from then on, every time we designed a magnesium handle or riser that needed a grip on it, well, he would take that grip section and then we would design the rest of the handle around that, because he wanted so you could interchangeable the same grips that we had been using with the new model. So the grips in the area in the handle that they fit was strictly Jim's design. So he was a big asset to the archery.
And then it sounds like from looking through your paperwork that you became assistant bowyer in '68.
January 1st, I think, of '68.
And then presumably some mid '69 or so, when Owen Jeffery got promoted to vice president, you became the bowyer.
I think that's about the way it worked out.
So what was it like working with Owen Jeffery?
Owen was great to work with. He was very talented, and he shared his talents. I mean, he was willing to tell you anything and everything. He was a good shot. He shot both right and left hand. He shot right-handed, instinctive, and then when he tried to get into target shooting, he went to left hand so he wouldn't bring on board all of his bad habits that he had from the instinctive shooting. He also made, in his past, he made slingshots and sold them on his own, and he also, the first man I ever saw that made boomerangs, and he could hand those out. He knew how to throw them, and that one day when the wind was calm, we went out into he made one real quick, a four-bladed one, which I still have, and went out into the parking lot in the area, and he threw this four-bladed boomerang that he'd made out, and stood there, and he never missed a step. He just reached out with his hand, and the thing sat there and spun on his hand. And so he really knew what he could do. He was an artist in that sort of thing, and he was easy to work with, very pleasant gentleman. And so I learned a lot from him, and he's the one that showed me how designing of the bow and what the deflex, the reflex, and the recurve all meant on there, and how it should interact with one or the other, so he didn't overstress any particular area of the limb.
Do you think, besides what you learned from Owen, you had mentioned Fred Bear borrowed you his technical side of archery book?
Yeah.
Was that book valuable at that time?
It was somewhat valuable. It was a guy by the name of Klopsteg, and I don't know remember who the other guy was. Anyway, wrote the book, and they did testing for back then. We're talking about the late 30s, early 40s, how the arrow actually snaked or bent around the bow, and why spine rating of an arrow was so important to the bow weight. And it showed they had lights on it and took pictures. It wasn't high speed, but it did show how the arrow went around, flexed and went around the bow, and then straightened out just beyond the bow. So it was kind of neat that the technology was, worked on back that early in the time frame.
The other thing we were looking at, the custom bow logs.
Yeah.
So how did that work with the whose idea was it, or how did that work to have kind of those custom?
That was Owen Jeffery's idea, because there were so many different grips. There was a high grip, low grip, medium grip, and everybody had their own preference. And so he came up with the idea that we could custom make these grips. or anything else that they wanted, whether it was wood colors and that sort of thing. So I'm not sure what year it was, but they had a shoot down at Cobo Hall, and they had a place there set up that Neil Bice and I went down, and we took information down and took pictures of the people, whether they had a high grip or a low grip, that sort of thing, and made notes of their special ideas of how they wanted to hold it. And then we could come back, and with those pictures and with the notes that we took, we could actually customize various handles to fit the individual bow shooter. And so that seemed to work out pretty good. As you just found another book that I had, I'd forgotten about. I didn't realize we'd made that many, but we took quite a few orders, and it seemed to be a good situation that people appreciated.
Yeah, one thing I noticed, I didn't mention it yet, but there was like a Jugger Gervais grip. Does that ring a bell at all?
No.
Okay, he was a target shooter in that era, but I never knew him to shoot bear bows. But sounded like the C riser kind of seems like one of the most common things that the target shooters had customized.
But some of them had a real high grip, and then some had that, where it came down to your palm. But then other ones just wanted a stick there to hang on to, basically. So we'd have to cut that way out, just leave enough there to hold the bow together. And
those look weird.
and anything else we noticed that in the shooter, when we take pictures and make notes, any other little differences, we could modify those into the handle when we got ready to customize it.